This is a May Luna Media production.
Welcome to the Synaptic Soul Podcast, where science meets spirit and they totally make out. I'm Ava Marie Anderson, your quantum-loving, spiritually savage bestie, here to prove your energy isn't mystical, it is measurable. And oh, quick heads up, if you hear snoring or grunting or a dramatic sigh mid-download, that is not a ghost in the machine. It's just my Frenchie co-hosts, Rocky and Rambo, vibing at their own frequency. Let's dive in. There is something almost primal about the way that humans cling to the phrase, New Year, New Me. Like, we say it every January like it's a spell. Like, if we say it with enough conviction, the universe will wipe the slate clean and delete our nervous system search history and let us reboot as somebody shinier and calmer and hotter and more healed. And listen, I get the impulse. We love a threshold. We love a moment that feels like a door is closing behind us and another one is opening ahead. That instinct is ancient, but the way that we've been taught to use it, it's completely backwards, because here's the truth nobody puts on a vision board. There is no reinvention button. There's no version of you that suddenly replaces the old one at midnight on January 1st. Biology doesn't work like that. Consciousness doesn't work like that. Evolution, both personal or planetary, sure as hell does not work like that. But what does happen is far more interesting. Like, you don't become somebody new, you continue. You metabolize experience, you integrate lessons, you shed skin slowly, often imperceptibly, the way that cells turn over and bones remodel and neural pathways reroute themselves without asking for permission or applause. The problem isn't that humans want to evolve, we're literally wired for adaptation. The problem is that we have been sold a fantasy of instantaneous transformation that creates shame the moment that reality shows up. But here's where the science starts backing up what the mystics have always known. Your sense of identity is not some static thing living in your head like a name tag. It is a pattern, a dynamic living pattern built from memory and sensation and emotion and expectation. And patterns don't disappear just because a calendar page flips. They change through repetition and safety and time. So when we declare new me without honoring the nervous system that carried us here, what we're really doing is rejecting the parts of ourselves that were once adaptive and protective or necessary. And your system feels that rejection immediately. This is why so many people feel secretly exhausted and dysregulated or just low-grade panicked in January. There's pressure to perform transformation without permission to move at a biological pace. There is an unspoken demand to abandon who you've been without gratitude for how you've survived. And that creates internal friction, a kind of identity whiplash where one part of you is sprinting toward the future while another is still trying to make sense of the past. But evolution doesn't punish continuity. It just depends on it. In nature, nothing starts over. Rivers don't reset, they carve. Trees don't reinvent, they grow rings. Even cells don't become new. They divide and they replicate and they adapt based on conditions. You're no different. You're not meant to discard yourself annually like last year's planner. You're meant to expand capacity so that more of you can exist without collapse. Spiritually, this is what an initiation actually is. Not erasure, but expansion. Not perfection, but integration. The obsession with becoming somebody else is a trauma response dressed up as self-improvement. It comes from the belief that who you were wasn't good enough or wasn't safe or wasn't worthy of carrying forward. And while some parts of you might be outdated, like beliefs and habits and coping strategies, they don't need to be shamed or exiled to make room for growth. They just need to be understood and thanked and then gently retired. And this is where we start reframing the new year, not as a reset, but as a spiral. You return to familiar themes, boundaries and worth and love and power, but each time with a little more awareness and a little more choice and a little more regulation. You're not failing because the lesson looks familiar. You're evolving because you're meeting it from a higher vantage point. And so if you're feeling that whole resistant to new year, new me narrative, good. That tells me your system is honest. It tells me that you're not interested in bypassing yourself anymore. That tells tells me that you're ready for something deeper than an aesthetic change. This year isn't asking you to become somebody unrecognizable. It's just asking you to become more inhabited and more coherent and more you without apology and without urgency and without the violence toward your own timeline. Like, you're not late and you're not broken and you don't need to start over to evolve. You're already in motion. If the idea of new year, new me feels fake to your bones, here's why. Your body is already evolving whether your mind is caught up or not. Like, you don't need a resolution to become somebody new because becoming is literally baked into your biology. You're not a static identity trying to upgrade. You are a living system in constant negotiation with your environment and your history and your stress levels and your relationships and your sleep and your hormones and, yeah, your beliefs. Like, let's get something straight right out of the gate. Your body does not wait for motivation. It adapts automatically. Like, your cells regenerate and your neural pathways strengthen or they weaken and genes turn on and off based on input. It's not poetic language, it's literally epigenetics. Experiences leave chemical tags on your DNA that change how genes express without changing the DNA itself. So translation, what you live through alters how your body behaves long after the moment has passed. Trauma isn't in your head, dude. Healing isn't either. Your nervous system is the main character here. Every habit that you have ever had, every pattern that you repeat, every why do I keep doing this moment lives inside neural wiring that formed for a reason. And at some point, that wiring helped you survive and belong and regulate or make sense of the chaos. But here's the wild part. Neuroplasticity means that those pathways are not permanent. The brain remodels itself constantly based on repetition and emotional intensity and safety, not willpower, safety. And this is where the most personal growth culture loses the part. Like, we try to think our way into change while ignoring the body that actually has to carry it. Like, you can decide all day long that this year you're going to be calmer and braver and more regulated and less reactive, but if your nervous system doesn't feel resourced enough to support that state, it is going to default to what's familiar. And it's not because you're weak, it's because you're human. And this is also where spirituality finally makes out with science, because every spiritual tradition worth its salt understood this intuitively. The body was never separate from awakening. We've got breath work and fasting and chanting and prayer and movement and ritual. These were not aesthetic practices. They were technologies for altering state and regulating the nervous system and expanding capacity. Like, ancient people didn't talk about neuroplasticity, but they absolutely understood that repetition rewires the self. You don't evolve because you want to. You evolve because your system has enough stability to tolerate something new. Like, think about how often people feel like they've outgrown their goals. It's not that the goal was wrong, it's that the body already integrated the lesson. Biology moves first, identity then follows. This is why people wake up one day and realize that a relationship or a career or a habit no longer fits, even if it once felt essential. The system has changed. The mind is just catching up. And here's another piece that doesn't get talked about enough. Like cellular turnover. Many of the cells in your body regenerate on a regular cycle. Like, your gut lining replaces itself in days, and your skin cells renew monthly, and even bones remodel over time. Like, you are quite literally not made of the same material that you were years ago, yet we drag old narratives through the new bodies like they're sacred heirlooms. And this is why the new year can feel disorienting, because on a subtle level, your system senses change. Light shifts and circadian rhythms adjust and collective behavior alters. That's more reflection and more endings and more what now floating in the field. Biology is responding before consciousness has the language for it, and if you're sensitive, which hi, if you're listening to this, you probably are, you feel that mismatch deeply. So instead of asking, who do I want to become this year, try asking, who is my body already becoming? Like, what patterns feel harder to maintain, and what coping strategies feel louder and heavier and more exhausting than they used to? That's not failure. That is outdated wiring asking to be released. And this is also why slow change sticks. Small, consistent inputs tell the nervous system that it is safe to reorganize. Like just a few minutes of presence, or one boundary held, or one honest conversation, and one moment of rest that isn't earned. These are biological signals. They say, we're okay. We can afford to be different now. And here's another little moment for you. Spirituality without biology becomes fantasy. Like biology without spirituality just becomes mechanics. Together, however, they explain why growth feels messy and nonlinear and deeply embodied. Like you're not imagining your evolution, you are living it cell by cell, synapse by synapse, breath by breath. Like you're not behind in your process. Your body's already on it. Your job this year isn't to force change. It's to notice where change is already happening and then to stop fighting it. If there is one thing I want you to tattoo on your soul this year, it's this. You do not evolve faster than your nervous system feels safe. Not your mindset, not your intentions, not your vision board with the aesthetically pleasing serif font. Your nervous system is the bouncer at the door of change, and it does not give a single shit about how badly you want something if it thinks that something is going to cost you your safety or your belonging or your survival. And this is where so many people get confused. They think that they're blocked or they're lazy or they're self-sabotaging or not spiritual enough when in reality their system is doing exactly what it's designed to do, which is protect them. Familiarity feels safer than happiness to a nervous system. Predictability feels safer than expansion. Even if what's familiar is uncomfortable or toxic or deeply unsatisfying, at least it's known. At least the system knows how to survive it. Ask any person who's ever been in a toxic relationship. You know it on a cellular level. And from a biological standpoint, your nervous system is constantly scanning the environment and your internal world for cues of safety or threat. This process happens below conscious awareness. By the time your mind has had a thought about changing your life, your body's already run the numbers. And if the data says last time we tried this, it ended up in pain and rejection and instability or collapse, the system is going to pump the brakes hard. This is why New Year motivation crashes so fast. Like motivation's a chemical spike. Safety is a physiological state. One wears off and the other rewires you. So when people say, I know what I should do, I just can't make myself do it, what they're really saying is my nervous system doesn't trust this yet. But trust isn't built through force. It's built through experience and through consistency and through proof that change doesn't equal danger. And this is also where a lot of manifestation culture gets it wrong, and not maliciously, but just ignorantly. You can visualize all day long, but if your nervous system associates expansion with overwhelm and visibility with rejection and rest with punishment or success with abandonment, it'll quietly steer you back to your baseline. Not because you're failing, but because your system is loyal to your past, loyal to what kept you alive. So let's talk regulation, because regulation's not a buzzword. It is a biological prerequisite for growth. Like regulation doesn't mean calm all the time. It just means capacity. The ability to experience sensation and emotion and uncertainty and novelty without tipping into shutdown or chaos. A regulated system can stretch. A dysregulated one snaps or freezes. And here's where that science-spirit bridge gets delicious. When your nervous system feels safe, your brain shifts out of survival mode and into states associated with learning and creativity and connection and integration. Like your heart rate variability improves and coherence increases between the heart and the brain and hormones stabilize. Like it's not high vibe, it's measurable physiology. Safety literally unlocks higher order functioning. This is why rest isn't indulgent. It is literally evolutionary. This is why slowing down often accelerates change. This is why people experience breakthroughs not when they push harder, but when they finally exhale. Regulation tells the system we are not under attack. We can afford to reorganize. And yeah, this is all deeply spiritual. Every initiation story, every rite of passage, every mystical tradition understood that the nervous system had to be prepared for expansion. That's why initiations were gradual. Why the thresholds were honored, why elders guided those transitions. You were never meant to rip yourself out of one identity and slam your shit into another overnight. That is violence. That's not growth. So, if this year you feel pulled towards simplicity or fewer commitments and less noise and more embodiment, that is not you giving up. That is your system asking for coherence. That's your biology saying, I need a stable base before I can build something new. And here's the part that might sting a little. If you keep trying to force change without addressing safety, your system is going to keep resisting, and then you're going to keep blaming yourself. But once you understand this, everything softens. You stop asking, what's wrong with me? And you start asking, what would make this feel safer? That question alone is regulating. Safety might look like consistency instead of intensity, or it might look like boundaries instead of people pleasing. It might look like saying no to things that once made you feel important, but now just make you feel depleted. It might look like letting yourself be a beginner again, like just awkward and slow and unpolished. This is how the real evolution happens, not through pressure, but through permission. Your nervous system isn't in the way of your growth. It is the way. So when you work with it instead of against it, change stops feeling like a fight and it starts feeling like that next natural step. And then suddenly, new year, new me doesn't mean becoming somebody else. It just means becoming somebody safer to be. Here's the thing we forget when we make the new year painfully personal. Like, you are not evolving in isolation. You never have been. Every shift that you feel in your body, every urge to simplify and rest and speak up and leave and begin again, it's not just your nervous system talking. It's layered and it's ancestral and it's collective and it's happening in waves. Like, humans didn't invent the idea of marking time because we're obsessed with planners and productivity. We did it because our bodies could feel the difference between seasons and cycles and endings and beginnings. Like, long before clocks and long before calendars, people tracked change through light and through darkness and migration and harvest and rest. Time wasn't something that you managed. It was something that you participated in. And those instincts didn't disappear just because capitalism showed up and decided January should feel like a personal performance review. Like, on a biological level, humans are exquisitely sensitive to collective rhythm. Nervous systems sync, emotional states ripple, and you've felt this before at concerts and protests and ceremonies and funerals and births. Like, something moves through the group that's bigger than any individual. The new year carries that same charge, just quieter and more diffuse. Like, billions of people are simultaneously feeling closure and anticipation and grief and hope and exhaustion and possibility. And this creates a field. Like, you're not imagining that something in the air feeling. That is coherence and sometimes incoherence, all playing out at a scale. Now, let's layer ancestry into this. Your nervous system didn't start with you. It was shaped by generations of survival strategies and losses and migrations and silences and resilience and adaptations. Some of the urgency you feel around change doesn't belong to this moment. It belongs to the people who didn't have the luxury of rest and choice and slowness. Like, some of that fear around visibility or success or peace is inherited memory. And some of that hope you feel, that's also inherited. Evolution doesn't just move forward, it resolves backward. This is why certain years feel heavier than others, and why sometimes you feel called to do less and not more, and why the urge to heal and simplify or just tell the truth can almost feel non-negotiable. Like, you're not just responding to your own life, you are responding to unfinished business in the lineage and unfinished conversations in the collective. And right now, we are absolutely in one of those moments. Like, across the board, people are burning out on speed and noise and performance. Systems that once promised stability are cracking. Identities that were built on productivity and sacrifice and self abandonment are losing their grip. This isn't personal weakness, it's a timing issue. Like, the old ways are no longer able to metabolize by the nervous system, like individually or collectively. This is where spirituality gets grounded and science gets expansive, because from a system's perspective, change happens when a system can no longer sustain its current level of complexity. It either collapses or it reorganizes, and humans are no different. What looks like chaos is often repatterning. What looks like exhaustion is often a system refusing to keep paying an unsustainable cost. Like, your desire to evolve differently this year, more gently and more honestly and more embodied, isn't random. It's aligned with a larger recalibration happening across humanity. Like, we're all collectively remembering that pace matters and that coherence matters and that nervous systems are not infinite resources. And when enough individuals slow down and simplify and choose regulation over performance, that collective field shifts. That's not woo. That is emergence theory. So if you're feeling like this year isn't asking for a dramatic reinvention but a deeper alignment, trust that. If you feel less interested in becoming impressive and more interested in becoming real, that's not you shrinking. That is you syncing with a wiser rhythm. Your ancestors didn't survive so that you could hustle yourself into the ground pretending that everything is fine. They survived so that choice could exist, so that regulation could be learned, so that evolution could become conscious. This new year isn't a starting gun. It's a tuning fork, and you're not late to the resonance, you're right on time. No one really prepares you for the grief of becoming. Like, we talk a lot about growth and leveling up and awakening and healing and stepping into your power, but we rarely talk about what it costs, because evolution isn't just addictive, it's also subtractive. And every subtraction carries a loss, even when it's the right one. And here's the part that tends to sneak up on people. You can be deeply aligned with your growth and still feel sad. You can want what's next and still mourn what's ending. You can be proud of how far you've come and still ache for the versions of you that no longer exist. That doesn't mean you're stuck. It just means that you're integrated enough to feel the entire thing. Like, identity deaths don't just arrive dramatically. Like, sometimes they show up as like a quiet disinterest in things that once defined you, or conversations that feel flat, or goals that suddenly feel hollow. It's like a version of yourself you try to summon only to realize that they're gone, and not in a tragic way, just complete and finished and retired. And nobody tells you how disorienting that can be, because the mind likes continuity. The nervous system likes familiar reference points. So when an identity dissolves, even a painful one, there is a moment where the system goes, wait, who the fuck am I supposed to be now? And that liminal space can feel like grief and emptiness, nostalgia, or even low-grade panic. It's not because something is wrong, but because something is no longer needed. And this is where people often try to rush to fill the space and to reattach to something, anything that offers a sense of definition. Old relationships, old habits, old roles, not because they fit, but because they're known, and because the system hates a vacuum. But here's the truth, that in between is sacred. And from a biological perspective, this is integration time. The nervous system is recalibrating and new neural pathways are forming, but they're not yet stable. Old ones are weakening, but they're not yet fully gone. So, of course, it feels wobbly. Like, of course, it feels tender. You are literally between versions. And spiritually, this is the void. It's the pause between the inhale and the exhale. It's the moment after the ritual, but before the revelation. Every initiation tradition honored this space. Like, people were given time to grieve who they were before being named who they're becoming. We lost that reverence somewhere along the way, and Then we replaced it with pressure to bounce back or to just move on. But grief isn't a detour from growth. It is actually part of the process. And let's be clear, this grief doesn't mean that the old self was wrong. They did their job. They got you here. They kept you alive, and they made choices with the information and the capacity that they had at the time. Honoring that person doesn't mean returning to them. It just means letting them rest. And this is especially true for identities forged in survival, like that overachiever or the caretaker, the one that held it all together, the one who swallowed needs to keep the peace. And when those identities begin to dissolve, there's this weirdly strange mix of relief and loss. Like, who am I without the thing that once made me valuable? And that question can feel terrifying until you realize that it's also liberating, because on the other side of that identity death is a version of you that doesn't need to perform to belong. It's a version of you that gets to choose rather than to cope. A version of you that moves from obligation into authenticity, but you can't skip the mourning. This is where the ritual matters, not the aesthetic kind, but the honest kind. Naming what you are letting go of, acknowledging what it gave you, feeling the sadness without trying to reframe it into gratitude too fast. Like, grief metabolizes change. Without it, transitions get stuck in the body as tension and fatigue or emotional numbness. So if this new year feels quieter, heavier, more reflective than you expected, good. You're not bypassing. You're letting the nervous system do what it does best when it's allowed time to integrate. You don't need to know exactly who you're becoming yet. You just need to stop pretending that you are who you used to be. You need to let that old self be honored and let the space be awkward. Let the sadness pass through without turning it into a problem to solve. Becoming requires room, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to grieve the life that you're outgrowing, even as you step toward the one that's waiting. All right, listen. Becoming isn't a moment. It's a practice. It's not a declaration, not a deadline, not a personality overhaul that you announce to the internet and then quietly abandon 6 weeks later. A practice is different. A practice is relational. It's something that you return to, not something that you conquer. Like, resolutions live in the future. Practices live in the body and in the present tense and in the small, unsexy moments that nobody claps for. And biology backs this up hard, by the way. The nervous system does not change through grand gestures. It changes through repetition and predictability and a lived experience. Through showing up again and again and again in ways that tell your system this is who we are now. And this is why the most profound shifts rarely look dramatic from the outside. They just look like choosing rest without justification, or responding instead of reacting, or pausing before saying yes. It's like noticing when your body tightens and choosing differently, not perfectly, but consciously. These moments are quiet, but they're also revolutionary at a cellular level. Like, evolution doesn't ask for intensity, it asks for consistency. And this is where so many people get tripped up. They think if they're not doing something big, then they're not doing enough. But your nervous system doesn't need big. It only needs safe. It needs to know that this new way of being isn't going to disappear the moment that life gets stressful. And life is going to get stressful. It needs to know that you're not going to abandon yourself when things become inconvenient. So, beginning this year might look boring. And I mean that as the highest compliment. It might look like fewer goals and more presence, or less explaining and more clarity, or fewer relationships that drain you and more time with yourself where your body can actually settle. It might look like saying this is enough for today and actually meaning it. That's not complacency, that's regulation. Spiritually, this is embodiment, not chasing enlightenment, but inhabiting your life, letting awareness live in your muscles and your breath and your choices, not just in your thoughts. The mystics weren't floating above their humanity, they were inside it, fully here, fully felt. This is also where identity finally stabilizes, not because you decided who you are, but because your actions and your values start matching without effort. Coherence replaces performance. You stop trying to become and you start actually being, and ironically, that's when the change accelerates. So, if you're tempted to ask, am I doing this right? Let me offer you a better question. Does this feel sustainable in my body? Because sustainability is the signal of alignment, not excitement and not urgency and not the external validation. This year doesn't need you to prove anything. It just needs you to participate and to listen and to respond and to trust that evolution is already underway, and your only real job is not to interrupt it with unrealistic expectations or self-violence disguised as growth. You don't need to become somebody else to be worthy of what you want. You need to become somebody who can stay with themselves while it arrives. So no, it's not New Year, New Me. It's New Year, more me. More honest and more regulated and more integrated. Less force, more truth. You're not behind, you're not late, you're not failing at transformation, you're just practicing becoming. And that, my love, is how evolution actually works. You have been listening to the Synaptic Soul podcast, where science meets spirit and they totally make out. If this episode hit your frequency, do me a favor, rate it, review it, and share it with your fellow quantum weirdos. It helps the wavelength reach more souls. And if you caught a little snoring, that wasn't a portal, just my Frenchies Rocky and Rambo offering background blessings. Music is Cheat Code by 1,000 Hands, used under Creative Commons. And I am Ava Marie Anderson. Stay weird, stay wired, and keep making out with your higher self.